So welcome everybody to our first webinar. We are happy to see everyone here. The title for this webinar series is called Preparing for a Successful Storage Season. Like Addie said, I'm going to facilitate this meeting. And just a quick agenda, we'll just go through a quick intro about NAPSO, and then Nathan Gellies will talk about storage sanitation. And we'll do some quick questions at the end of his presentation. And then Todd Forbush will talk about field selection. And we'll also do some questions at the end of his segment. And then we'll do some NAPSO updates and future events. Just a few housekeeping things. If you want to raise your hand to speak, please do that with the little notification so it flags the speaker. And then please keep your mic on mute. There's a lot of people on this call, looks like 50. So we need to keep the noise to a minimum, please. So like I said, welcome to our first webinar. If you're new to NAPSO, we're so excited that you're here at our first webinar. If you're returning, we really appreciate your support. Just a few things about NAPSO. We're dedicated to shaping the future of potato storage practices in North America through meaningful industry collaboration, education, and innovation. Our mission: to revolutionize how potatoes are stored across the continent, enhancing the sustainability and profitability of the potato industry. Our vision is to enhance cutting-edge potato storage solutions and facilitate insightful and engaging industry discussions that promise to transform potato storage practices positively in North America. So that's our quick intro. And with that, I'm going to give the floor to Nathan Gellies. He will be talking about storage sanitation.
Can everybody hear me and see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. So I am Nathan Gellies. I am the potato advisor with Decco Post-Harvest. I appreciate all your guys' time today and coming to see this presentation. And without further ado, I'll just kind of get started. And today I'm talking about, early storage management and the role of sanitation. So, kind of some of these first steps into properly preparing your storage for this upcoming season. So before we get into that, I want to talk about some of the objectives of storage. So there are a lot of different objectives of storage, but to kind of summarize it, we're trying to preserve the tuber quality for as long as possible. So we want to make sure the end user is getting the best product there is, and our job is to maintain that through a storage season. So to do this, we have to manage our weight loss, control our sprout development, all while maintaining our end use qualities such as colors and sugars and starches and everything else that goes into making sure we have a acceptable potato at the end of the season. Another one that I'm going to kind of focus on today is controlling disease and minimizing decay. So once the potato is removed from the vine, it is essentially a ticking time bomb. It is from that point on, that quality is as maximum as going to be, and it's just going to deteriorate throughout the storage season. So anything we can do to minimize this decay process is going to help us store this product a lot longer and make a lot more money at the tail end of things. So what are some of the tools that we have to manage storage quality? The first thing we have are sanitizers and disinfectants. So we use these to clean our storages before loading, and then we can also apply some of these in to potatoes once they're in storage. Then probably the biggest thing we have to help us maintain quality and storage is proper storage management. So this is managing temperatures, moisture, humidity, CO2, providing adequate airflow throughout the storage. And, none of this is possible without maintaining your storages properly. So I just want to drive that point home that, all this depends on maintaining your storages and getting them up and running before the season starts and not waiting till the end of or as soon as we start loading before we start even looking at our storages. So next thing we have is there's a few fungicides that we have available. This does help protect our healthy tubers from becoming infected, but we cannot cure potatoes that have already come in with disease. So, and then we have a few sprout inhibitors. If you look at this list, it is not very long. So we do not have a whole lot of tools to manage in storage. So bringing the best possible crop into storage is our best option to store potatoes the longest. Today, I will be focusing on sanitizers and disinfectants. And so what is the importance of storage sanitation? First of all, we want to clean the slate from last season. So I've got this picture of a chalkboard with a bunch of problems. We don't want to start a new season and write over these problems. We just want to wipe those clean. We want to have a nice clean chalkboard. We want to be able to, have the best chance we can to be able to store this crop for as long as possible and maintain that quality. Another good thing for it is good agricultural practices or GAP programs and good handling practice or GHP programs, all kind of you get extra points and whatnot for the storage sanitation part of it. And then we also don't want our storages looking like this. So, we don't want a hot spot that we had this year carry into next year. So we want to make sure we get this cleaned out. We want to start the new storage season clean. To kind of drive this point home a little bit further, I'm going to use an analogy of a bank vault. So if I were to give you $1 million today and told you you got to keep every dollar of that in 10 months time, whatever you lose is gone forever. You don't get it back. Are you going to put it in this shiny, nice vault on the left with locks that look like they work and it's very secure and very clean? Or are you going to put it in this vault on the right-hand side that maybe the locks don't work? Looks like you could get some mildew in there. You could get some, water leakage, or somebody could break in, steal some of it. Some of your money's just going to disappear. The obvious answer is you're going to put it in this nice, shiny vault and clean vault. So why wouldn't we do the same thing with our potatoes? I mean, it's essentially $1 million cash prize we have that we just have to keep for 10 months, and then you get the rest of it at the end of it. So just want to kind of drive that point home is, start clean and end better. So what are some of our target pathogens for storage sanitation? Our two key pathogens for storage sanitation are bacterial ring rot. This can last 3 to 7 years, depending on the surface and the storage. So it's very, very important that we have proper sanitation processes to eliminate this pathogen, because it can cause a lot of issues in our storage. Our second issue that we really need to work on is silver scurf, and this is becoming a more prevalent problem in the industry, and that can survive 3 to 9 months depending on the material, but this just proliferates in storage and can just be spread so easily. So this is the two key pathogens that storage sanitation targets. Now, when we look at soft rot, dry rot, pink rot, blight, all these other issues are not typically a major issue for storage building sanitation, as long as we're actually cleaning out that storage and we're doing, basic storage sanitation steps. These are not an issue. Now, if we start neglecting, basic cleaning, then that can start leading to these issues translating into the next season. So, we need to at least do the basics so these don't become a problem in storage from the previous crop. Before I get into this too much, I want to bring up the disease triangle. I know we've all seen it probably 100 different times, but I just want to point out that we have to have the pathogen, the host, and the environment. We have to have all three of these in one spot and working together to be able to have disease. Now, potato storage is a perfect place for this disease triangle to be completed. We have the host, we have potatoes stored in there for a long period of time. We have the environment. It's a perfect environment for bacteria and fungal growth. Humid, dark, cool, but not cold. And then we do have the pathogen. We're bringing it in on tubers, or if we didn't clean, we're carrying it in from the last season. So just to let you know, we do have the potential for a lot of disease. And so we're kind of going to get into the storage sanitation steps. So here's the list of the 4 simple steps that storage sanitation is, and I'm going to break them down individually as we move on. But step 1 is removing that gross material. Step 2 is a high pressure wash with soap and detergent. Step 3 is a high pressure rinse and or steam clean. And then the last step is disinfection. So we can kind of think of this as washing our hands. So say you're in a field digging all day and you probably put your hand through a couple rotten potatoes and now you want to eat your sandwich. We don't want to skip steps 1 through 3 and just put, Purell on our hands and eat a sandwich. You're still going to have dirt and grime on your hands. So we need to remove, all the major dirt before you go wash your hands in your sink and just plug up everything. And then, next thing you do is add water and soap and then rinse that off. And then you might want to add Purell, especially if you had some, nasty disease that you stuck your hands through. So just kind of think of that in that step as we go through these steps. So step 1, removing gross material. This includes removing all the large foreign objects that might be in your storage. So chunks of insulation from the piler boom swinging in or the hogger hitting the side of the walls and breaking things off. So wood, if you've had your storages open for a while, empty, you might have some rodents in there or some weeds that have blown in. Just make sure we move all those large foreign objects. And then we need to remove all the dirt piles and potatoes. So pick up all the big potatoes. If you have culverts with potatoes in them, make sure we're getting the, large potatoes out of there. We want to vacuum, scrape, shovel, and sweep all of our storages, all the areas. Vacuuming is preferable because it doesn't spread dust everywhere. If that is not available, sweeping would be your next best option. But we just want to prevent, spreading more organic material or more dirt everywhere because that gives bacteria a place to survive. Plus, organic material can neutralize a lot of our sanitizers. So we want to make sure we get this place clean before we're doing these next steps. If you have dirt floors, it is recommended that you scrape them. The recommendation is 1 to 2 inches. I know that's not going to happen in a real situation. So if we can at least get that top layer off of it, that will at least help us a little bit. And then we want to also clean around the outside of our storages. So we want to remove access piles, coal piles. We don't want to scrape everything out right in front of the front doors and then, have wind blow everything right back in. We don't want to put piles of dirt or coal piles right in front of your cold air intake or your fresh air intake. We want to get it far away from the storage. We don't want to have any issues near and around our storages just so we don't, increase our chances of getting disease. And it's always a good idea to run a magnet over your storage area. Not technically part of sanitation, but, just good practice to have for gap and for making sure we don't have any metal objects running through our potatoes. It's always recommended that you keep dumpsters around your storage so people can have an easy access to throw things away and not end up in your potatoes. Step 2 is our high pressure soap and detergent rinse. So we want to make sure we're washing all of our surfaces with high pressure. And we want to include an effective detergent and or soap. This helps begin breaking down biofilms. So especially for bacterial ring rot, it creates a hard biofilm on the outside of it to help protect it. So that protects it from sun, air, and that's how it can survive so long on these surfaces. So the soap helps break that down. And then we're also removing dried plant sap or residue from the walls. If you saw my picture in this 2 slides before, it had remnants of plant material on a wood surface. So we want to make sure we're getting all that sap and residue off of there. And the pressure just helps do this. We want to make sure we're doing our walls, ceilings, plenums, air ducts, our fan houses, everything. And if your floors are cement, pressure wash those too. It all helps. And make sure we're starting from the top and working our way down. So we don't want to clean the bottom, the floors, and then wash the roof and then have it all drip down. So make sure we're working from the top down, same as you would wash your car. So Step 3 is a high pressure rinse. So think about it as washing your hands. We put soap and we lathered up really good. Now we need to, rinse that soap off. So we need to get all of that soap residue off. If we use steam, this can help further break down those biofilms, and the steam can actually help kill some of these pathogens. So if you have steam available, it is recommended to use that if possible. Once again, we want to start from the top and work our way down. And this step also helps remove more organic material from surfaces and gives our sanitizer the best chance it has for killing these pathogens. So up to this point with the first three steps, we've taken care of the host. We've removed all the potatoes out of there and all the soil and everything else that these pathogens have a chance to survive on. And now we've also removed the environment. We've cleaned everything, the dirt's gone. And so we're working pretty well on the disease triangle. Now you may say, okay, we removed the host, we removed the environment, we removed two of the three. Why is this not good enough? Because we have to have all three of these to have disease. Well, here in a few short weeks, we are going to be putting a host right back into that storage. And then we're going to be kicking those storages on and creating that environment. And so all that hard work would have just gone down the drain if we don't start reducing the pathogen load and target that in the storage. So we really need to make sure we're taking care of all three of these before we're putting potatoes in the storage. But to take care of the pathogen is where sanitation comes in. There are a lot of products out there that are available for sanitation. They all work pretty well, or a lot of them work pretty well. So you have your quaternary ammoniums, you have your hypochlorites, which are like your bleach-based solutions. You have peroxyacetic acid or PAA. You have chlorine dioxide. The phenolics and formaldehyde aren't used very much just because they are poisonous and very hard to use. And depending on what your pathogen is and the material of your building will kind of help dictate which of these products is right for your situation. So just talk to your local applicator and they will help you out with that. With that, we want to do some buffering and some testing. Hard water can neutralize many of these sanitizers, so we want to try to buffer our water to about a pH of 7. Check your label. Some of them require just slightly different methods. So just make sure you're reading that clearly and making sure we're not neutralizing this product with just our water. And once again, we want to use clean water. I've mentioned several times that organic matter neutralizes sanitizers. So if we're using, say, ditch water and we're bringing in all that algae and dirt, it's just going to neutralize our sanitizer before we even apply it to our storage. So just want to make sure we are getting the best use out of these sanitizers as we can. There are lots of different test strips out there to help test for your pH of water in solution and also your sanitizer levels. So they're pretty affordable. So really easy step to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck out of your sanitizer. And so applying the sanitizer, we have a couple different methods. The first is spray sanitizer. We do need to make sure that we're getting the spray in direct contact with all of the surfaces. So that means your roofs, your cracks, your crevices, everywhere. And we need to maintain a minimum of 10 minutes of contact time. So this is where foaming agents really come in handy because we have to keep that surface wet and that sanitizer on there for 10 minutes. High pressure application is recommended to help break surface tension and help penetrate into the cracks and crevices of our buildings. Kind of going back to proper storage management, building maintenance is very critical. So if we have corners of our storage that are cracked and holes poked in the wood and you have all these cracks and crevices, this is a space for pathogens to just thrive and survive. So we need to make sure we're replacing and patching places that look like this. And if we're not, we need to make sure we're getting sanitizers down in all those cracks and crevices. So just something to be wary about. And back to plenum tubes, if they're curled or bent or anything like that, that makes it really difficult to clean. And that gives a place for pathogens to survive and thrive once again. Plus, it inhibits airflow, which is going to cause problems throughout your storage season anyway. So get those straightened out. Make sure we're cleaning them inside and out. Setting them out in the sun is not an adequate sanitation program. We need to clean them, we need to wash them, we need to sanitize them. Then you can set them out in the sun to help kind of finish them off. So, and the second method we have for sanitizing the storages is fogging sanitizers. Depending on your region and your applicator, make sure you're checking to make sure it's a legal application in your area. But we need to select appropriate fog generating equipment. Some of these prefer cold fogging, high pressure fogging, applying it through your humidification systems or thermal fogging things. So just make sure you're using the correct fogging equipment for your purpose, and your applicator can help you determine what is the best for that. With this, we want to make sure that entire facility is completely filled with fog. So oftentimes this makes us use the higher concentration to accomplish that kill. And then we also need to build pressure in that storage to help get that product in all those cracks and crevices. With fogging, our minimum contact time significantly increases. 4+ hours, some are more than 8 hours that we need. So we need to make sure we're getting our contact time with fogging sanitizers, and the longer is always better. So before loading potatoes into the storage, we want to keep them closed as long as possible for that sanitation to move all around, and just do its job. Optimum is 2 weeks, but we want to allow at least a few hours. And before we put any potatoes in there, we want to make sure everything is dried out before we put potatoes in there. We don't want to put potatoes on wet surfaces and cause more issues that way. So I know a lot of our storages are going to have tight scheduling where, maybe unloading a week, if not less, before they're getting loaded again. And that's when storage sanitation becomes even more critical. If we start cutting corners with these tight schedulings, we're going to run into a lot more problems. And that's when some of these other pathogens that aren't typically a problem could become a problem. So just make sure we don't cut corners and we complete all the steps, not just one or two of them. With that, I just want to say we've taken care of the host, we've taken care of the environment, now we've taken care of the pathogen, and now we have a clean, pristine vault to put our $1 million in. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time and ask if there's any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Are there any questions out there?
John Hutchison here, Dawnfresh. Just wondering what happens to all the wastewater that you've used in the store. I know across here in Europe that would be a contentious subject, where all that wastewater is going. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to work with our dirt floors. It's hard to manage that. It's a lot of it's going to soak in there, and that's partially where that recommendation of cleaning that top 2 inches of soil comes off of, is managing that contaminated soil there. Other places, you just want to make sure you're spreading all that wastewater and diluting it as much as possible.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Nathan. That was great. Todd, you're up.
All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk a little bit about field selection going into storage. What's this crop look like coming out of the ground, and kind of what's its potential storage signature? So without further ado, need to get back to the front of this, and off we go. All right, so this is called crossroad to harvest. And really what we're trying to look at is how that crop is actually coming out of the ground and headed into storage. So what's that storage signature going to look like from a chemical maturity point of view? If we want to look at factors that influence sugar concentration and gravity in potatoes, I've got 4 of them here on the screen. We talk about the soil, and probably your soil and variety on the right-hand side. Your 2 most critical agronomic choices are where are we going to plant this crop and what variety are we going to grow for the utilization that we've got it planned for. That's our major agronomic inputs. We've got cultural practices on the lower left, all the different things we're going to do in terms of use of fertilizer and chemistries. And then Mother Nature holds all the wild cards with the weather. So we want to pay attention to each of these things, but we're going to drill down a little bit more on how to read how those influence the genetic expression of that crop and its maturity point going into storage. So from the weather perspective, we always like to look at, and this is the Fahrenheit version for those in looking at centigrade, we're going to use a base 5 instead of a base 40, and I'll show the calculation as well there. But we want to look at cumulative growing degree days to get a feel for how much heat did this crop see, and when did this crop see heat? When did this crop see stress? So a few of us were talking before the presentation. I said, how's the crop going where you're at, Todd? I said, maximum temperature today is going to be 70 Fahrenheit, just under around 20 C. Minimum temperature is going to be down into the 50-degree range or 10 degrees C range. What do you think the crop looks like? Well, we all know that's not a stressful day for potato. Potatoes love those days. It does get stressful, however, when our low nighttime temperature stays at 70 degrees, and this says CI, but it's Fahrenheit. 70 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and growing degree days at 35 or higher. So when we look at those in centigrade, when we're seeing 21 degrees C or higher for a minimum temperature, so it doesn't get cool at night, that crop has to then draw from its tubers to keep the vines active and alive. If we see over 20 base 5 heat units accumulating in a day, that calculation again shown here. If we had a maximum temperature of 29.4, minimum of 20, you take the average temperature, subtract your base, you end up with 19.5 degree days. That day would not be a stressful day. But we try and look at where those stressful days occur during the growth cycle of the crop. Stressful days prior to tuber initiation are tough for vines. Vine growth also would push root growth a little bit, but not going to impact tubers. When we look at during tuber initiation, stressful days are very critical. If we get a lot of stress while we're trying to set tubers, we can have a set impact, or we get lower sets, or in indeterminate crops, we can cause multiple sets. So where are these stress days occurring, and how are they impacting that potato? So that's the weather piece that we try and look at, is that those heat units, where those heat units are accumulating in the growing season, and then how they're going to impact that potato's maturity going into storage. So one of the things we're looking at again is to define that crop's maturity. And we're going to use pre-harvest sugars, specifically sucrose and glucose, to help define potato maturity. It's something all of us need to know and start to understand more about in order to make sure, especially in the processing industry, that we come out with a successful storage season. So one of the things we look at is the tuber sucrose rating. And then we look at that compared with the canopy vigor and try and get a feel for how that canopy is coming into its senescence phase and dying relative to how the tubers are building, or the plant is building those tubers with sucrose, and then also ultimately specific gravity. We need to know where that crop is in its tuber life cycle. One of the things that we can have that will delay maturity of the crop is high N or high nitrogen utilization, or low heat unit accumulation. Nitrogen absolutely has an impact on maturity, and it can delay maturity if too much N is used, or N is used at the wrong time, nitrogen fertilizers at the wrong time. Another issue that compounds, another stress factor that can compound maturity, either delay or speed maturity up, would be disease or drought. So it's important to know what kind of disease pressure we have, and then also if we're having issues with an irrigation system, or if we're running non-irrigated, when did that crop actually see the stress of that dry ground, the dry soil? Maturity is evaluated, and it has to be evaluated prior to any fall stresses, and we'll get into that in another couple of slides. But it's important for us to know how a mature crop is in a healthy state before fall stresses can set in. So just a rough idea of what pre-harvest samples can help us with, specifically nitrogen management and the impact to costs, and also the impact on the environment. When we look at applying nitrogen at the cost that we're talking about, a few $100s invested in pre-harvest sampling is a very good investment to help us determine if our nitrogen utilization was where we thought it would be for this crop. Obviously, no one wants to spend more on fertilizer than they need to. At the same time, we want to make sure that that application we're using is getting consumed and applied properly. So when we look at the opportunity to get that growing season report card on maturity, pre-harvest sugars can give us some insight into that. And it's a significant investment, even on an 80-acre field, can be north of $10,000 an acre in that investment in just nitrogen fertilizer. And we can get a good feel for whether we did a good job or not with that, with some simple pre-harvest sampling. We talked a little bit about sucrose analysis prior to fall stresses and specifically fall frost. And many of the places where we store potatoes, we come up against a deadline where the crop will be killed if it's left in the field. And if we see lower than 3 degrees, -3°C, or lower than 28 Fahrenheit for more than 20 hours in a row, that crop's done. We're not going to be able to store it at all. It's going to have cold temperature sweetening prior to that, though. So when it comes to sugars, we get a mixed signal when we have cold temperature sweetening occurring. If we have a cold temperature, the crop brings its carbohydrates up into sugar form to try and protect itself from freezing. And it can appear to be immature, even though it's just a chilling injury that we're seeing here. It's not maturity. So we need to determine before that crop sees cool weather in the field, whether it's mature or immature. If the crop's immature and we experience frost or cold weather in the field, not to the point that it's going to make the crop unharvestable, but to the point that it's going to be stressed, when we store that crop, we're going to look at holding above 52 to remove excess stored sugars, because this was an immature crop, okay? And that's going to expose us to more pathogen breakdown. So it's really a tightrope you're walking. If that crop's mature, if the sugars are in a good spot prior to the frost in the field, then we can cool that crop down, get it below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees C, where the pathogen activity is lower, and then we can wait for the chip or fry quality to improve over time. So it's important for us to get that evaluation before Mother Nature brings the frost in the fall. So just some basic practices. How is it that we would do these samples? How would we collect these samples? Well, we've got some issues potentially with field variability. Where do we take the measurements? We've got to take a canopy rating measurement and a canopy uniformity measurement. What are those? And then what are some barriers to get this information? So let's walk our way through this. So we recommend that we pre-harvest sample 2 times minimum prior to vine kill, or harvest if you don't vine kill. So the samples would be 3 weeks before vine kill or harvest, and then again within 1 week of vine kill or harvest. The reason I'm saying or harvest is there are areas where potatoes are grown and vine kill is not a common practice. And some on the call might say, how will you ever store potatoes without killing the vines before you put those potatoes in storage? And we can take that conversation up another time, but it actually does happen. We would strongly recommend vine kill if it's a practice that can be done. But when your growing season's short, it is something that is being managed around in different places on the North American continent. So what do? We take 40 tubers and we take those potatoes from specific plants and we harvest all the tubers from that plant until we hit 40. So if we're harvesting tubers by hand, we get 12 tubers in the first hill, 12 tubers in the second hill, 12 tubers in the third hill. We need to get that next hill. And if it's got 15 tubers in it, then we're going to end up bringing additional tubers back that we don't need, but we want to get all of the tubers that are under those hills. At that point, we would record that we had 5 hills, and then we would have a total of 39 tubers. 41 tubers. So 51 tubers. I'll get my math down. So that would be more than we needed again, but we need to know what our average tuber count is, and we need to know then also what the number of stems were on those 4 plants to give us a feel for our breakdown between the number of tubers per stem that this plant's running. So it gives us an idea where things are. Then we're going to take those potatoes into a laboratory that can measure sucrose and glucose, and we'll also check for specific gravity. Our laboratories do provide sample pickup and digging services if you need those. And we want to have all that information. Again, we're going to look for those 40 tubers, minimum sample size. We're going to get the total number of stems on the plants that were there and the total number of plants that we harvested so that we can get those key metrics into the system. Disease pressure is the next thing we want to talk about. What types of disease pressure did we see? Did we see early die? Did we see blight in the field, late blight in the field? What observations of impact on crop quality? So did we lose canopy? Did we have to desiccate early? So these are factors that we want to know about when we go into storage. What's our historical knowledge of the disease tell us? What are we going to see in storage with this? You know, our goal is to bring no disease into storage. So it's important for us to, anything that we've got disease pressure is kind of defined in, we want to pull away and say, let's take a very high measure of caution when we're going to have disease around the storages. Now we're moving from the field into the storage. We're going to talk about that storage evaluation of product in the storage. So in the storage, we're going to sample for sugars every 2 weeks throughout the storage season. Every week as potatoes near senescence or as sugars dictate. So we want to not get caught by surprise, wonder what the quality is. As we're trying to schedule that inventory through a processing plant, and again, this is mostly for processed potatoes, we want to know where that quality is at relative to, is it in the improving mode or is it in the degrading mode? And interestingly enough, potatoes handled properly in storage actually improve in their sugar concentration levels in a way that we can make them a better product than they were when we delivered them off or when we brought them into the storage often, which it's one of the few things you can improve. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a representative location in the bin. So if there are multiple fields present, we're going to separate those off and separate the fields so that we can tie those pre-harvest samples with what's going on during storage. We're going to take the top layer of tubers off. We're going to take 40 tubers and place them in a container and mark them. In the future, we want to sample from an exact same location. If this were not a destructive sample, we'd want to take that sugar reading time on time and watch it in that individual tuber as we move forward. The goal is to get what we would call sister tubers or sibling tubers so that we know what that specific location is. We're not trying to represent the entire storage. We're trying to see how that specific location is changing as we move through the storage season. So some of the questions that we can kind of help work on as we're using sugar information for management protocol. First and foremost, if we've got pathogen challenged potatoes, if they're rotting, we want to cool below 48 Fahrenheit quickly. Now remember, if they're immature, then that may also cause us some sugar issues. So one of the problems you can have is if you cool immature potatoes, you may never have them in condition so that they'll make an acceptable processed crop. So it's important to know if they're mature or immature. If they're immature, we don't need to do as much preconditioning, but we would take weekly samples during what we call preconditioning, that time when we've dropped the temperature down and we're trying to follow how the recovery process is going with those potatoes. We want to try and get that, if it's gotten field frost, we want to try and get that onto the market as quickly as we can. For success in storage, we want to see sucrose ratings, and this is going to be variety dependent. Just put some ballparks up here. Below 1 for sucrose and percent glucose below 0.15 in the fry world and below 0.007 in the chip world to have acceptable process quality. So cooling management is one of the pieces of the puzzle that we need to make sure we're making, you know, an intentional decision with, not just cooling based on the calendar, but cooling based on when it is that we're going to sell the crop, what the condition of the crop is, and then determine where we should end up with that crop as far as a final holding temperature. Cooling rate, 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So that'd be 0.2 C to 10 degrees C for fries and chips. We'd continue at 0.4 Fahrenheit or 0.2 C to 45 for cedar table. When it comes to the fries and chips, we're going to finish that cooling rate off to whatever our final temperature is at 0.1 centigrade, 0.2 Fahrenheit per day. And that final holding temperature is going to be based on what our market is, what the variety is, and what the sugar concentration of that crop is at the time. So those are some decisions we're going to have to make. One of our key decisions: how quickly are we going to cool, and what's our final holding temperature going to be? Those are our management's decisions that sugar data will help us make. When we're cooling that storage, we're on our fans at maximum speed, high humidity, no heat, and then we're going to watch our pile plenum differential to make sure that we don't let that plenum get too much colder That's 3 degrees Fahrenheit, 1.6 degrees C. No air differentials larger than that when we're cooling the crop to help us avoid the excessive weight loss and pressure boost we can get when we're cooling too aggressively. Proper holding temperature. How do we evaluate whether we're at a proper holding temperature for a crop? So we say we're going to hold at 48 degrees or 9 degrees C, 48 Fahrenheit. Well, if our sucrose is stable or falling, the glucose is stable or falling, and our quality is improving after cooling, then we're at an appropriate holding temperature. If we've got a situation, and you can see it here, where we're holding too low, when the temperature is too cold, we'll see sucrose rising, which is the top, sucrose rising, glucose rising, quality dropping. And you can see here, we got in this crop a little too cold. And so we want to make sure that we recognize that, and we're not called to ship that crop at a time where we're going to end up getting an economic penalty because of our decision of too quick a cooling or cooling to too low a temperature for the crop that we have in storage. So that's an awful lot of information. And I want to close, as I do most of my presentations, and say that Dr. Cargill told me in 1985 the potato is never going to let us know all the secrets. And what I like to say is we're each going to get 1 or 2 secrets, and if we don't share, we're never going to get to the end. So it's important for us all to talk with one another, and that's really what this organization is about, is trying to get best management practices out in the discussion arena where they can, be honed and then applied more effectively. If you'd like a PDF version of this, give Dave Carpenter a shout, and thanks for your interest.
Thank you,
Are there any
Todd.
questions?
Yeah. Any questions from anybody?
Just a statement from the UK, from one of Todd's old buddies over in England. A statement that was made to me from a gentleman at a similar sort of time was, potatoes continue to make fools out of professionals. And I absolutely live by that. Great presentation. Thanks, Todd.
You bet, Dan.
I think Addie has a question.
Yeah, hi, Todd. So what if you have limited access or funds for sugar testing? Do you have one specific or 2 specific time frames that are most critical for assessing the physiological age and health of your crop?
Yeah, Eddie, thanks, and great question. Really, the reason in this presentation is called Harvest Crossroads. The time before you vine kill to try and determine what the environment, what the soils, what the variety and agronomic practices, how did they all play out in really genetic expression? That's the most critical time. So we want to know in a pre-harvest time frame, that 3 weeks before harvest or vine kill, the week before harvest or vine kill, that's when we want to know what the sugars are. That's the most important time frame, if you will.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Odd question from Dan again. Are you still using YSI, or have you moved on from YSI?
A good question, Dan. Right now, the technology we're using is YSI. The more advanced dual chemistry, 2900 is what we're using today. We've done a lot of looking at other things. There are others who use other methods, and really the method isn't as critical as just being able to accurately repeat sucrose and glucose or 12 and 6 carbon sugar readings. We all know there's going to be a little fructose in there, and YSI is reporting as dextrose, so it's actually all 6 carbon sugars. Good question.
Having used it for a little while, I absolutely, I wouldn't grow a crop without it these days.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we work with folks, is that I think that anyone who's used this as an enzymatic membrane system, so you're looking at how active alive enzymes respond to the concentration of sugars in a solution. You know, there's enough confounding factors there that you need to have a pretty tight process in order to get good repeatable results. And that's one of the challenges that have been in place for years, is just the challenge of getting good repeatable results from this equipment. And then, of course, if you don't get repeatable results, there's confounding feedback to say that we received value or did not. So whatever you do, it's important that you get good repeatable information to make decisions from.
I think that would be my feedback would be, I look at the numbers, but it's actually the trend that's more interesting. And actually, through sugars, it's remarkable how you can pick up the slightest traits, whether fans are open, CO2 levels are building. That can all be picked up through that sugar testing. That would be my experience.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Todd. That was great. Just a few.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a few more closing remarks. So just want to talk about some future NAPSO events. Our first central committee meeting is September 9th. And during that meeting, we'll be talking about setting up our steering committees. So if you're interested in being on those, I think there's 4 committees, let us know. We have a list of names, people who have reached out that we will put on those committees. And if you're interested, just contact at napso.info to let me know to put you on the list. We're also submitting a proposal to the MPC for the Potato Expo in January. This will be a panel, and it'll include a processor, an applicator, a grower, and a researcher, I believe. And we'll be talking about storage topics during that time, like sprout control, probably disease control at that point, because it will be January. So it'll be kind of a panel. If you're interested in being on that panel and you'll be at the expo, please let us know and we can put you on our list. We have to have that submitted, I think, by September, the beginning of September. The PAA has let us know we can host the symposium next year in Wisconsin. So we're working on that proposal, and we have to have a general outline and speakers lined up for that. So we're just waiting on a few different details for that, and should be submitting that by the end of this month. Our next event is at the Potato Growers of Alberta, and that's in November. And more information will be sent out about that if you're up in Alberta and want to stop by, but it'll be kind of like a pop-up sort of NAPSO. Maybe we'll have 1 or 2 speakers. That's still we're still working the details out on that. And then we'll also have more webinars throughout the year that'll engage industry members with real-time solutions for what we're seeing in storage. So we probably won't have one between now and the expo in January, but maybe we'll have one in March. We haven't really discussed that fully, but we'll just be around to all of the shows this winter, and hopefully we can see you guys at those events and we can talk more, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you at the expo in January so that we can do our panel. Is there any feedback, questions? Did you guys like this? Did you find it beneficial? And then also if there's any other topics that you guys would like to see? Anybody? Lukey?
He's on
You're on
mute.
mute. Yep, you're on mute.
Sorry, Emily. Okay, so I just want to mention that we'll get the recording, the presentation on our website, napso.info, ASAP in the next day or two. And if it's okay with you, Todd and Nathan, I'd be happy to publish your presentations as PDFs there. Is that good with you?
Absolutely, Luki. If you've got any questions, give me a shout.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Todd. Great stuff.
Works for me too. Thank you.
All good, Nathan.
Dan? You're on mute.
Sorry, my hand was up, hand was down, and I then forgot to speak. And maybe something around GM and gene editing as well in the next 12 months would be really interesting from my perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Kurt, could you give your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, one might include the topic of residual treatments during the storage season.
Okay. Is it, oh, during storage? Okay, I'm just making a list. That's a good one. Thank you. Anybody else? David?
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe we could talk about ventilation and how to use ventilation in the storage season.
That's a really great topic. Yeah. We have several ventilation companies that have reached out and wanted to be part of this group, so that would be an easy topic for us to cover. Thank you. Victoria?
Yes, hi. I know a question was brought up earlier about the wastewater issue, and I know in Quebec that's becoming quite an issue. So I think people might want to know more about how to handle that. The best.
I don't have the best service here. I don't necessarily have any topics. I think this was great though. We're just about to start storage here in at our Indiana location. So thank you.
Sorry, I guess we were two Victorias on the call. So
Yeah.
the other Victoria jumped in. So yeah, just that wastewater handling
Okay.
with cleaning is definitely something I think people have some interest in, at least in the East.
Thank you. Shane?
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the call and hear all this. I just wanted to bring up if anybody has any questions on providing bins or bin storage, that is where I can help out, because I know that's a big way and big direction everything is going now. So I can definitely help out in any areas that anybody needs any information on bins.
Okay. Like storage, like building? Is that what you're, just to clarify?
Building bins, yes. Building and supplying bins, yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. Shane. Addie?
I had a grower approach me about how to store in duality, meaning you've got a crop of potatoes and you're not sure if they're going to go to processing or to fresh, how to straddle or stand on that fence for that season until a decision's made.
Good one. Multiple end uses. That's a really good one. David, do you still have a question, or is your hand just still up?
All right, I'll close it.
Okay. Sounds good. It looks like Shane, Victoria is asking you to provide contact information. Maybe you can do it in the chat there, if anyone else is interested.
I will do.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? No. Okay. Thank you everyone for attending our first webinar. It was really great to see all of you guys, and we hope to see you through the season at our next event. So, all right. Thank you guys. Bye.
Well done,
Thank you
Emily.
all.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you all. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye bye.